I'm on point. All right, if we can get going. If people can find their seats. Good afternoon, I'm Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper. I'm Vice Chair of the NGA's Economic Development and Commerce Committee. It is my pleasure to co-host today's exciting plenary session on outdoor recreation with Governor Snyder. The outdoor recreation industry has become so large, and it's almost a stealth industry in the size. If you look at the power that's going on in terms of increasing public health, creating jobs, connecting our communities, outdoor recreation activities alone contribute $887 billion annually to the economy. They support over 7.6 million jobs and generate over $80 billion of tax revenue. The outdoor recreation industry, I think in many ways, has a direct impact on the future prosperity and health of all of our states. And in Colorado, we see the impact all the time. The renewed enthusiasm for getting outside is not just limited to those communities where there's manufacturing or other job creation, but it's throughout the state. And I think we're seeing some of the strongest growth in outdoor recreation that we've ever seen. And whether you're talking about national parks or state parks, urban greenways, public lands, outdoor infrastructure continues to be critical to making sure we do have a strong outdoor recreation economy. In Colorado, we announced a few years ago, Colorado the Beautiful, that within one generation, within 20 years, every kid in Colorado will be within a 10-minute walk of a green space. And we are actively building on that. This afternoon, we're going to examine how states are capitalizing on this resurgence of the outdoor economy by examining ways to integrate recreation and parks into their statewide economic development strategies to grow and to really spur job creation and at the same time promote public health. And I think this conversation is going to give us a chance to look at policy solutions for cultivating the outdoor recreation economy and really begin to share the successes and best practices that many of you have already had. In particular, I look forward to hearing from those states that have developed a statewide outdoor recreation office. We have an Office of Outdoor Recreation in our Office of Economic Development. We did this several years ago. And also especially looking forward to hearing from two companies we have with us today, Cryptech and REI, that are real bellwethers and leaders in this emerging economy. We certainly recognize the value of these companies in the industry throughout our natural wonders and public lands. And we realize this is not a democratic or a public issue. It's something, if you look at the landscape of all the things that divide us, this is a great opportunity to really unite us. It creates, that SAT word, topophilia, love of place. I think, we get that chance after you've been out hunting, or you finally get to the top of a peak. You see the sunset at the end of a long day outdoors. You really do get a sense of why we all love where we are. Part of Colorado, we have an organization called Great Outdoors Colorado, and their mission is to preserve and connect the wild places in our state. They started in 1992. They take a portion of our Colorado lottery proceeds to help preserve and enhance parks and open spaces. Great Outdoors Colorado has committed more than $1.1 billion in lottery proceeds to more than 5,000 projects in every single county without any tax support at all. And I think the results are in. We had 77.7 million visitors to our state last year. The vast majority of them were involved in some form of outdoor recreation. Our economics around outdoor recreation, it's $34 billion in Colorado in consumer spending. It's over 350,000 Colorado jobs. Almost, not quite, this will be the year it becomes $1 billion in in state and local tax revenue. And when you add up all the wages of those jobs, it's over $4 billion in wages. So again, I see this value of not only the jobs, but getting people out of doors to exercise is long-term one of the solutions to the challenges we face in healthcare inflation. And I think, again, as I said, it's one of those things that can really unite us. So before we get to the panel, I want to turn it over to my compatriot on this, Governor Snyder, who also has been working on this and talking about this for a long time.
Well, thanks, John. And it's always great to be with you, and you have a wonderful outdoor state. What I would say with respect to this issue, I think it's great to have on the agenda, this concept of outdoor recreation. Because quite often when we do these meetings, we'll spend all this time on jobs, workforce, and those are critically important things. But to put it in perspective, this is also part of it. And we tend to overlook the fact that this is major industry in its own right. And then secondly, it's not just about having a job for our citizens, it's about having great quality of life. And it's about having these recreational opportunities to improve that quality of life that makes it a symbiotic relationship to say, you need the total package. And that's where it's great to have the opportunity to have some wonderful speakers with us and to talk about this as a topic. Just put it quickly in perspective for Michigan, we're proud. We truly are an outdoor state. You just talk about water, we're the Great Lakes state. 40% of the Great Lakes are within the boundaries of the state of Michigan. In addition to that, though, we have 11,000 inland lakes and well over 10,000 miles of rivers and streams. So you talk about boating, we're proud to say we've got some of the best boating companies, but boating opportunities. We're probably second or third in terms of the number of boats that a state has. But beyond that, fishing. We're a top 3 fishing state. And we encourage you to come, everything from salmon to inland things like trout. We have it all. But new things are emerging, and I think we'll hear about that. Things like kayaking and new uses of the water that are really exciting. They've been there historically, but they're just booming. In Michigan, we're proud to have the world's largest manufacturer of kayaks, Hemisphere Designs in Muskegon. Their business is just exploding. And we're doing things like water trails now, not just trails for walking, but water trails people want to follow. And that's really exciting. In addition to that, though, we're a forest state. Many people don't know over 50% of Michigan's forest land. And so those are huge opportunities that we also love in our state. Hunting is a really big deal. If you want to come to Michigan, I recommend you not come on November 15th. That's the start of deer hunt season. It's not an official state holiday, but most people are going to be, a million people will be off work, going out in the woods to go find a deer. So it's wonderful in that regard, and you look at that. But trails are really exploding in terms of doing that. We announced something really neat to help encourage more development. The Iron Bell Trail. It's a trail that will go from Ironwood, Michigan to Detroit, Michigan. That's over a 600-mile distance, and it had such demand. We've created a walking trail and a bike trail, so a total of 2,000 miles of trails is now under development. We're over 70% done, and that'll link into another 10,000 plus miles of trails within Michigan. We're literally becoming the trail state. And we're finding people really encouraging us to do more. The Philanthropic Society are all coming together to do this great work. So it's wonderful to have this outdoor life environment, and I encourage people to go for it. Our state parks are booming. We're the second largest state park attendance behind California is the state of Michigan. So wonderful recreational opportunities, wonderful job creation, and great things. So it's pure Michigan is the way we describe it in the simplest sense. But we've got 49 other colleagues. They have wonderful states themselves and some great territory. So I encourage you to get outdoors. And with that, let me turn it over to a speaker I'm excited to hear from, because this is truly a great success story. Butch Whiting is a person that served in our military. And thank you to our service to our country in some very difficult times. But beyond that, he and his partner took something that was something they believed in, they loved, they started as a hobby, and they're proven entrepreneurs now. They're innovators in terms of taking ideas and making it something real. And in 2010, they created the Cryptep Outdoor Group. And now they've continued to grow. So they took something that they learned from the military, where they're helping keep us safe. Now it's evolved into something where they're employing people in this country in great occupations that I think you have a very bright future, and it's great to have you here with an opportunity to learn the wonderful things you've done, but also where you can go in the future. So with that, I'd introduce Bruce Whiting from the Cryptep Outdoor Group.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's
Let's give him a round of applause. Come on, folks, you gotta get fired up here.
it's an honor to be here. I am Butch Whiting, the CEO of Cryptic Outdoor Group. Yesterday, my daughter was selected as Miss Rodeo Teen Idaho, and I missed her coronation last night because I had to fly down, and she told me, Dad, it's okay, it's very important, it's such an honor that you got to go do this, and I'm sure that you're going to add value for the governors. So it's definitely an honor. We'll see about the adding value here going forward. So I'm going to talk to you from an entrepreneurial perspective with the outdoor industry, and I'm going to use my personal experience. I'll quickly talk about the Cryptic backstory and brand and our history. Then I'm going to talk about why we selected the state of Idaho, and then I'm going to come up with some recommendations and for the governors that are here when it comes to outdoor recreation. So the concept of Cryptic, next slide please, whoever's got them. The concept of Cryptic begins in 2006. At that time, myself and the other founder were actually downrange in northern Iraq, fighting our nation's battles. At that time, I was flying Apache attack helicopters. I was a troop commander under H.R. McMaster. He was my senior raider. When we weren't flying missions, we would daydream about being in the outdoor industry, and we would reminisce about hunting stories that we'd been on, and we'd live vicariously through magazines and DVDs and all these things that we had missed since the War on Terror started. There's a lot of hunting seasons that were missed, and a lot of opening days, like your November 15th, that were missed. The idea for Cryptic was to take some of the technologies that had been advanced in apparel, and specifically in special operations apparel, and spiral it into the civilian hunting market. I wrote a 25-page business model, and we kind of just went on about our day, but I had this business model, and it ended up landing at the headquarters of Cabela's, and to this day I still don't know how it got there. But it landed on the table of the big game hunting program manager, and he called me up out of the blue, and he said, we'd really like to talk to you. We absolutely love this tactical hunting crossover that you have. We know that demographic exists, but we've tried some stuff, but we can't do it well. And you have all this authenticity and credibility. We'd like to talk. So I flew to Sidney, Nebraska, and our first big break that Cryptic had was I entered into an exclusive with Cabela's. And in 2010, 11, and 12, the only place you could obtain or buy Cryptic gear was at Cabela's. And this is where we start our hobby phase. So we still have guys that are still in active duty military. I had just separated, and I'm in Alaska when this all occurs. I landed in Alaska when I got out of the military. We also had some other big breaks during this hobby phase. One of them was that Cryptic was selected as one of the final 4 in the U.S. Army Camo Improvement Effort, which was a major solicitation ran out of Natick looking for a new family of camouflage. We were down selected with 3 other companies, billion-dollar companies, and then Cryptic is just myself and the other co-founder, Josh Claycorn, with our laptop computers and our phones. That was our office. We developed some camouflage based on a camo netting, down selected, extensively tested, and today Cryptic is the only camouflage that's in the civilian hunting market that's been extensively tested by the U.S. government and then selectively used in special operations, both U.S. and also coalition special operations. So we have programs right now with U.S. special operations. So we continue to be tactically focused and then also chase our passion for the hunting industry. As things progress, there's all kinds of other rabbit holes to go down. This whole story is usually about an hour and a half, but I want to accelerate through it. The bottom line is we finally got to a point where we were confident enough that we could make this work, and we were going to quit whatever else we were doing, and we're going to go after this full time. I'm residing in Alaska as part of the U.S. Army Camo Improvement Effort. I'm asked to go to Orlando, Florida for a meeting where all these pieces and parts are going to come together as part of this big solicitation we're in. And I physically could not get there in the time that they requested. I found out on a Thursday. My first flight out was Friday. The bottom line is logistics are hard out of Alaska, especially Fairbanks, Alaska, right? And we were north of Fairbanks, Alaska. So we started to look at the lower 48 to find a state that we could move our headquarters to and establish our headquarters. And I analyzed a bunch of states, and we basically ended up landing in Idaho. Next slide. So Idaho, let me just read you some statistics on Idaho to kind of build a case here. There's $7.8 billion in outdoor rec spent in Idaho. What's fascinating to me about that is that that's the same amount as the total export of all agriculture, including the potatoes. And Idaho's famous for potatoes. I had to live with that license plate as I was in the military at all those military installations. So outdoor rec is just as big as our agriculture export. There's 78,000 outdoor rec jobs in Idaho. There's $2.3 billion in wages and salaries, $447 million in state and local tax revenue, and 79% of all Idaho residents participate in outdoor rec. The parks and recreation, Idaho contributed $184 million to the state's economy in 2016. There's over $1 billion contributed to the Idaho economy annually by park visitors, including snowmobiling and motorized boating and off-highway. 5.1 million in sales tax was generated and 5.4 million in fuel taxes generated. For every $1 that an Idaho person pays in taxes towards a park, $54 are returned back to the local economy. The annual visitor spending is $641 million that are visiting the Idaho parks. Fish and game, there's 400,000 valid license holders in Idaho. There's 280,000 tags purchased by residents and 37,000 non-residents. There's 14,000 jobs that are tied into the fish and game, and $1.4 billion per year for Idaho's economy. Idaho also has a robust firearms industry. There's over 6,550 total jobs, almost $300 million in total wages, and Idaho firearms industry is in the top 10 for total jobs per capita, federal excise tax per capita, and economic output per capita. And then the obvious is Idaho is a phenomenal state when it comes to rivers and mountains. There's 107,000 miles of river in Idaho. There is 200 natural lakes, 37 reservoirs. There's 3,000 miles of whitewater in Idaho. And we have the largest contiguous wilderness, the Frank Church Wilderness, in the lower 48, and there's 3,000 miles of trails in the Frank Church. So all these things weighed in on my decision where I was going to bring Cryptek to. Awesome outdoor activity. There was also the access availability, great airport to get in and out of Boise, and then just overall the quality of life within Idaho. So we located our business to Idaho. But the number one walkaway and the number one thing that really convinced me to go to Idaho was the next slide. So it was the mentality and the philosophy of the state governor and its agencies, the parks, the rec, Idaho Fish and Game. I was reached out to before I made the decision to go to Idaho by at the time, Idaho Commerce Director, and I had a conversation with him, and it became evident to me that his mentality and the mentality of the other agencies that he worked with and the mentality of Governor Butch Otter matched my mentality as well. And that was ultimately the decision factor that pushed us into the great state. So regardless of the state's sources, if it's going to be lakes and boating or whatever else, here's some considerations and recommendations that I have to the governors. The first one, when it comes to the brands, and regardless of where they are in their life cycle, is to foster relationships with those brands and view the brands as ambassadors of your state. The brands will represent the state. They're also going to be your eyes and ears of what's happening within the industry. To attract new brands to come into your state and either have a presence or a headquarters or develop jobs, it's important that you're interacting within the industry. And one of my major recommendations is to go to trade shows and conservation groups. There's nothing more humbling than to have the governor and all of his agencies walk into your booth at a trade show. That is true support. To try to generate a culture of support that you're viewed as an extension of the brand. I view the agencies within the state of Idaho as an extension of my company. And that culture of support goes both ways. I also will sometimes contact an agency with a recommendation or something that I see and provide them input. I recently reached out to our Region 3 Fish and Game commissioner because I saw something on social media that I knew was going to blow up, and it was within his region, and he got ahead of it. And so that culture of support is mutual between the brand and then the government, the governor and the agencies that fall within the outdoor rec. You'll see this synergy that starts to develop where you'll attract new brands because we interact with all these brands at all these shows. And we interact with them in the field. We interact with them on many levels, marketing and so on. But if other brands know that you have this culture of support, they're going to be attracted to your state. The creative cross-marketing and cross-promotion is extremely low cost, and it's very, very high ROI. If you look at some of the brands that you have within your state and you look at their viral platforms, whether it is Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and there's collaboration between the brand and the product and the state, they're promoting this recreation. And it's easy to get behind a state that has these great recreational opportunities and then also integrate the products that are being produced by these brands. Super, super simple, but your agencies have to internalize this it's important. I think that your mentality and your philosophy then becomes their mentality and philosophy, and you're going to generate this culture of support where you're basically unified with the brands that will reside within your states, and you're cross-marketing and cross-promoting. And the last comment that I'd have to say when it comes to this is the internalization of the North American wildlife conservation model. This model is what allows us as a country to enjoy the luxuries of hunting and fishing as we know it today, generated by Theodore Roosevelt. It's not well known even in the hunting industry, but it basically states that all of our fish and wildlife belong to the American people, and we have the responsibility to manage and maintain that wildlife forever, for future generations. And it's very, very evident when you go to other countries, which I've had the luxury of doing, to hunt and see how they're train wrecks. This is driving this outdoor hunting, fishing industry, and it's a great profit center generating monies for our states. These other countries, they don't even have the luxury to go out and enjoy what we do here, and it's very, very unique. So at the end of the day, regardless of what you have within your state, I would recommend that you generate a culture that you are an extension of the brands that reside within your state that are big in the outdoor industry, and ultimately partner with them, potentially maybe in a level that you didn't do before.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Butch. I appreciate that. Good words of advice. Governor, and I think those words apply to probably every governor in the room and those who aren't here as well. Governor Inslee, are you prepared for the introduction for one of your finest citizens?
Indeed, and he is one of our finest citizens of one of our best companies, REI, a company that started selling pitons of years ago, Jim Whitaker to his friends, and now is just a world leader. And it's a world leader not only to the quality of their brands, but it is a remarkable company because they have led on so many things that go beyond fitting boots. And by the way, if you want a pair of boots, go to REI. They fit boots like nobody else in the world. I've never had a blister in 50 years hiking with REI boots. Just to mention some of the reasons we're so proud of REI. First off, they have greened their supply chain like maybe nobody else in America. And greening the supply chain is very important to maintain the fish and wildlife that we know is so important that we just talked about in hunting and fishing. They have advocated for inclusion of everyone having an opportunity to get outside. I'm particularly personally excited about that because my son works for a group called Outdoors for All, which takes blind people skiing and quadriplegics kayaking, and REI is just a significant part of that, and we appreciate the leadership on that. And they understand the connection of health. We all have obesity epidemics in our state, and the best response to that is REI. So we appreciate this company, and we're glad he's here to give us some guidance.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm going to go high and hit some points quickly, and then maybe hopefully leave some time for some Q&A. I want to make a point. Let's pop up a first slide. I think I got 4 buckets on there. And if it doesn't, I'm going to keep going. There we go. Deep connection. Outdoors is unique, and I think it's important. I want the governors to understand, I believe it's a uniquely American concept, and I agree with what Butch said. If you understand how our public lands, our attitudes towards wildlife and game, and just access to this public experience, these amazing vistas are in America, you realize how unique that is to America. What I want the governors to understand, I think is even more critical, it is inherently local. Everybody loves their connection to where they are from. And if you sit for a minute and say, what's amazing about your state, at some point you're going to begin to talk about the outdoor experiences associated with it. Born and raised in Oklahoma, I can't hear a dove and not think about growing up on the farm in Oklahoma. You know, in Colorado, Colorado, I have a place up the road at 4 hours from Colorado, which I'm going to when I leave here, on the Arkansas River Valley area, that I've taken my family to for 20 years. And the memories that I have there, and as I introduced my new grandson, 5 years old, to that opportunity, that experience to be outside, the memories associated with that are so deep. Utah, which is a state of just amazing grandeur, had a chance to spend a week in Zion in February. It was just breathtaking. Climbing in the Grand Canyon. I spent 5 days on the Pacific Crest Trail in the North Cascades Mountains in my state of Washington, where I live now. And these places are incredibly touching. And so when you think about the outdoor industry, it's personal and it links to passion. REI, and the other thing I would point out is I believe it's unifying. When you're talking about love of place, and you have people that live in a place, and you're leading as a governor that place, I think you'll find that love for the outdoors is one of the unifying factors. I think that's important. We talk about the outdoor rec economy. It's growing. There's a movement afoot. I'll just give you a couple of data points. REI is an 80-year-old co-op, and for most of those years, we were one store. And what's happening right now, we have 15 million members. The last 2 years, we've added 1 million new members every year. These are people coming in, giving us a $20 bill, and becoming a lifetime member of the co-op. And the vast majority of them are under 30. This is a movement that is really taking off. 3 years ago, we did this thing called Opt Outside on Black Friday. We looked at what was going on, the commercial frenzy that takes place the Friday after Thanksgiving, and we discovered we weren't really good at it. It wasn't where our heart was. We closed our stores and paid our folks to go outside. It exploded on us. We never saw this coming. We had 1.4 million people that first year go on social media and join us Opt Outside. We had states, many of the governors here opened up their parks if there was fees. We had federal parks open up. Over the last 3 years, we've had 15 million people on that Black Friday on social media go out and record what they were doing as they opted outside. It's a movement. Even the National Park 100-year celebration, which we just experienced in the last 2 or 3 years, as they started telling that story and telling the unique American roots, the visitation to the national parks exploded. You've just heard, we heard earlier in New Mexico talking about the tourism growth here. Governor Hooker talking about what's going on in Colorado. Outdoors is booming, and it's really growing in demand. The economic impact of it is really, I love the word stealth. It is a stealth industry. And part of the reason it's stealth is that it's so broadly dispersed, from small manufacturing, the stories of, I have a passion for this idea in the outdoors, I'm going to start a company, and then that company taking root and growing and becoming bigger. We're a $2 billion outdoor retailer, $2.6 billion outdoor retailer. But you start thinking about the size and the magnitude of this $887 billion industry. I'm not going to repeat the stats. The stats you heard here in Colorado and in Idaho, those stats are available for every state. You can look at exactly what does the rec economy mean in your state? How many jobs is it supporting? What's going on there? What I do want to call out is the unique economic impact of this. The supply and demand, the rural areas are wild places, are the supply. The job creations often take place in these wild places. The trailheads, the traffic into these trailheads, the cross-country skiing routes in the winter, the fat bike riding on trails in the winter in upper Michigan Peninsula. So the rural wild places are where the demand is. Our urban cities are growing at the fastest rate. I think it's between 80 and 90% of our people now are moving into these urban environments for jobs. That's where the demand comes from, the desire and need to have that outdoor experience in their life. So it's one of the few industries that really touches your rural places and touches your urban environments. It's a unique aspect of this industry. What I'm really proud of, in January in Colorado, the governor and I kicked off from 8 different states. We had representatives show up that governors had appointed to advocate for watching out over this outdoor rec economy and doing what they could to advocate and protect and encourage that, fuel it. Since then, 2 more governors have acted and created this. This is one of these industries that if you fuel it, it creates win-win environments. It's 10 now. We're hoping to get to 13. We're going to start a revolution. That's how many it took when we started the whole United States thing going. But it is, I do want to thank the governors that have taken that first leadership step to create these roles. And I think it is really unique, and it is a state issue where understanding what is the outdoor rec opportunity in your state and how do you step into that and what is the impact in your rural or wild places and how does that meet the needs that come out of our urban places. Last comment really about the path ahead. Inspired by the national parks, I read about those as that had that 100-year celebration. If you go back and research, what you find out is a small group of men and women 100 years ago developed this idea of this American way, of setting the public lands aside and making them available for the public. It's just a direct rejection of kind of a European model. But a small group of people had this vision for what that would become today. All of the lands we enjoy and we celebrate that really are the backbone of an outdoor rec economy started with that. Out of that, we asked a question at REI, and we really broadened the conversation, brought a lot of people into it. It says, what should we be doing now to really preserve that will have an impact 100 years from now? What's going on right now? What came back was a little dark. As a people, we spend 90% of our time indoors. That's 70 years of a life expectancy, you're indoors. Even probably more alarming, and this really comes from child safety, a lot of other issues. Kids are now spending 4 to 7 minutes outside daily. That's shocking. That's scary. As we become increasingly urban, I think we have a need for these outdoor experiences. We need, so I think the other thing that's going on that's really amazing, you're starting to see New York physicians write prescriptions for kids to be outside. The medical evidence coming out of our best institutions, UW, out of Harvard, out of these other big institutions around the health and wellness impacts of just being outside is almost overwhelming. So I think this idea of not only is there an economy to support that really touches all parts of the state, it's actually a direct link to kind of the health and wellness. You will see as we kind of watch the evolution of what's happening and the technology influence, ideas like screen addiction. What does that mean? What is the solution to that? And I really believe the outdoor rec economy is going to become one of these most important solutions that we need as a people to really be whole and complete and it's become an increasingly important thing. So my ask, what I'm so excited about the opportunity to really address this group, is that if you haven't explored the idea of creating dedicated resources in your your respective state that look at the outdoor rec economy, I would encourage you to talk to the governors that already have and that are kind of leveraging that experience. And what does it mean? What are the actions and how does it drive your economy? What are the good that comes out of that? Because I think you're going to see it's an incredible opportunity, and I think it's one that is ripe really for state leadership. So I'm thankful to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to this esteemed group. And obviously, I'm very passionate about what the outdoor rec economy means, really regardless of whether you're talking about hunting and fishing, which has been a part of my story. I actually had to slide out of a river where I was still head fishing to get here 48 hours ago. But to whether it's climbing a mountain, through hiking on some of our great trails, the experiences truly are iconic and important. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
No, you bet. And two things on that. We talked about obesity a little bit. I think Governor Inslee talked about that as well. But more people are looking at, as we deal with opioid addictions, we're seeing also a national epidemic of mental health issues. And in certain parts of the world right now, they are prescribing, doctors are prescribing almost like a pharmaceutical to go, take 3 one-hour walks in the forest as a way to deal with that. And I think it's powerful. Also want to recognize Governor Herbert, who created this notion of having an Office of Outdoor Recreation. We copied it as quick as we could, which we have an enlightened larceny agreement between our two states. And I thought I'd get, Luis Benitez is here, who's our Director of Outdoor Recreation and has done a tremendous amount to try and create cooperation between the states. Luis, if anybody has questions for your state about getting involved in setting up an Office of Outdoor Recreation, grab Luis. Luis, stand up, wave. Thank you for all your work.
I've also got Dominic Bravo, the director from the state of Wyoming. So look, he's bigger than I am. So
One or the other. So now we have time for questions, and I know Governor Inslee, you had a question before, and then Governor Sandoval.
I'm so enamored of Jerry's talk, there's nothing left to say.
All right, we'll pass the microphone to Governor Sandoval.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and it's really inspiring. So I love to be outdoors and really enjoy our state parks. And as I visit our retailers across the state, I am trying to find a better way to cooperate with you and to encourage people to get to our state parks, to cross-market, what have you. Perhaps you have experience in other states as well, but if you could share some ideas, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually have it quietly. We don't talk about it enough. We're trying to change that. We have a program to get people outside. So we're actually delivering experiences. Last year we took close to 400,000 people outdoors into outdoor experiences. A lot of that is teaching class. And we would like to take that number from 400,000 to well over 1 million. We think that appetite is there and the demand is there. Ironically, the biggest challenge to doing that is permitting, getting access to take people into outdoor experiences. One of the things we do at the national parks in the 100-year celebration, we funded about $5 million of that celebration, but what we asked is the opportunity to take people deeper into the park. You go to your national parks, and what you find out is 99% of the people don't get off pavement. They show up in a parking lot, they walk on a sidewalk, they look at a beautiful waterfall or some experience, and then they go back and get on a bus or a car and they leave. We want to take people deeper into the park because these are amazing experiences. And we agreed to build trail, and we agreed to leave it better than we found it. So I think that the opportunities, and I agree that working with the agencies is a really important part of that, recognizing that as you get people to love the land, it is about, I think, public-private partnerships and creating access to those lands, but with an understanding that you're actually creating a lifelong love, but you're creating a situation where the park or the state park is in better shape when you leave than when you got there. So I think I think those opportunities do exist, and it is in guided outdoor experiences that I think people fall in love. You find today there's less people that have spent a night outside under the stars. And our biggest challenge, one of the things that at REI we invest the most time in, is what we call on-ramps. How do I get people that don't have an outdoor experience, that live in urban Los Angeles or San Francisco or Seattle even, to have that first experience outside and get the taste of it and then want to kind of get to a new place? In Seattle, we're doing a rewilding project. We've actually have buses that take people, we started this just 3 weeks ago, to trailheads. And some incredibly Mount Si, Governor Inslee will know what that is. It's a 4,000-foot climb in 4 miles. In the first weekend, we had over 600 people ride these buses in a single weekend to get to these trailheads. So I think there's a lot of things that could be done. All of it, by the way, was funded by private money. And so I believe the opportunity exists, but a lot of it is understanding that trade-off between gaining access and then allowing people to kind of program experiences into it.
Yeah, just one thing I would add on your comment there is, in Detroit, we actually created an outdoor adventure center, which has been a huge success. The Department of Natural Resources, with a lot of great partners, where literally we've had a lot of kids in Detroit that have never been in an outdoor environment, but you can go in this place, and it's not as good as being the real place, but it's the next stop where they can go in and simulate riding a snowmobile, they can be in a canoe, they can go fishing, and it's been a big hit. So now we're trying to find partners to help. Now that they've had that, how do we get them outside? And so the one question I had for you is how much we find we engage all these different hunting groups, the fishing groups, the steelhead people, the turkey hunters, they all want to help. As you said, that's one of the wonderful things here. It's not about the state doing it. It's like we've got partners everywhere that want to partner.
Yeah. REI has actually given over $80 million towards trail building and these kinds of programs over the last several decades. We're doing something very similar with the University of Chicago. The city of Chicago. We went into a really urban area that needed to be redeveloped, and we put in mountain bike trails and kind of the capability. And we believe there's actually a transition in major urban areas from inside to outside to outdoors. And that there's a huge opportunity just to create outside opportunities in your major city environment. So I applaud that Detroit effort. And there is an enormous amount of interest in getting people outside. They want to keep these traditions alive for the next generation.
I think back to your point, though, within this industry, you're going to get a lot of volunteers. And a lot of things can be accomplished for a lot less money than it would be if the government was actually paying for it. And so to harness that is important, and it's going to, I think, be the way ahead for ensuring that we're able to have this access that we're talking about. In the state of Idaho, the Frank Church Wilderness, there is no motorized anything allowed. 2 weekends ago, I spent several days with a buck saw cutting trees that had fallen across the trails. There's also got to be a balance with common sense. We did the same amount of work that we could have probably done in a day with a chainsaw. And that's just common sense. But it's a volunteer activity combined with common sense, having access to these areas, and then educating the people that are going to come in there that it is, somewhat of a unique experience, and not to leave it in a better condition, as Jerry said, than you found it.
And I think part of what these offices of outdoor recreation are about is helping organize all these different efforts and providing a convening source to allow the synergy to take place. And with that, Governor Herbert, you had a question, I think?
Get this going here. Yes, thank you. And again, I appreciate the topic. Appreciate Butch and Jerry for your involvement in the private sector and what you're doing. Butch, thank you for your service to our country. Jerry, if you'll say hi to Sally Jewell, if you see her.
I will.
We appreciate her leadership and her service as Secretary of Interior for those many years. We worked with her very productively. Let me just say amen to all that was said. The tourism and travel aspect of outdoor recreation is significant, and Utah's had a great benefit in that, and our tourism and travel has increased double digits the last 4 years. Last year, 12% increase in tourism and travel, mostly all outdoor recreation. And this year we'll set a new record for visitations and to our national parks and our state parks. As you probably know, we have 5 national parks. What is not as well known is we have 43 state parks. And we've put a lot of money into conservation efforts. We have we're the first in the nation, thank you for mentioning that, John, to have an outdoor recreation office. And out of that office now we have regional summits on outdoor recreation with the local communities. We now are putting millions of dollars of grant money into local communities to help augment conservation easements. And working with our hunters and fishermen and those organizations, we in fact have our deer herds are up, our bighorn sheep are up, our elk is up, our fisheries are up. So the outdoor recreation experience, particularly for hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, is really extraordinarily good now, probably the best it's ever been in Utah's history. Here's my question, really kind of leading up to, not all states are created equal. I know, Rick, your state, I don't know what your percentage of public lands are, but it's probably 5 million acres, and you have a lot of forests that you're working on. They're state-owned. You look at Colorado, they've got 18 million acres of public land. A little bit of disparity there. Utah has 36 million, twice as much as Colorado, and we're second only to Brian, who's got, I don't know how many you've got there, but you're the largest public land. And that challenge that we have with public lands and what you say, Butch, common sense, and how we manage them is shown a lot in the Intermountain West and the challenge of public lands. And how do you manage it? Under the BLM charter, multiple use. And you have the spectrum of from just wilderness designation, hiking, fishing, no motorized equipment at all, to farming, ranching, hiking, or hunting and fishing, where you can use some kind of motorized equipment, to extraction industries, including energy development under the charter of the BLM. Our leading environmentalist, we have many of them, but the one that most people are familiar with who's been involved so long is a guy named Ted Wilson. Ted Wilson, a good Democrat, by the way, John, and just a wonderful man and has been involved in conservation areas. He's helped lead the charge where we, in fact, in Utah, in addition to our 36 million acres of public land, have put conservation easements on private land to enhance opportunity to protect antiquities and Indian artifacts, etc. His challenge, though, was, he said, as we give him the assignment, let's find the appropriate balance. How do we get the appropriate balance to merge all these together? And so I'd like to hear from the panel, one, how do we in fact find the appropriate balance? Is it's not just going to be all wilderness, it's not all going to be extraction, and unfortunately we have this challenge in our state and others of trying to find out how do we find that balance that's correct? And secondly, what do we do in states that don't have as much public land? How do they in fact have an outdoor recreation experience if they don't have public lands to go enjoy the outdoor experience?
I'm happy to jump in and let others jump in. I think the balance question is important. I also think it's probably one of the more difficult questions to answer. I joined the board of TRCP, which is the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation, I keep forgetting what the P stands for, probably a couple of years ago. And it's a hunt and fish group, and I'm in the rec community, and I really believe there's a shared value. And recently, we've had a new member join the board who was the CEO of Shell. And what we found is that a life of professional experience in the extractive industry, but an ardent conservationalist. And so I think when we talk about balance of use and kind of wisdom and smarts here, it's recognizing that, particularly when it comes to public lands, I believe it's a stewardship over a long period of time. And those balanced conversations, it should be a conversation and a balance versus an imposed kind of a situation. Unfortunately, right now that's pretty hard to do. It's hard to have those kind of bipartisan balanced conversations. I do believe at a state level, if we engage in those conversations, you have the chances of getting to a better a solution where people are aligned goes up. And I think it goes up because at a state level, the caring for those public lands or for the opportunities to get outside and realizing the economic impact of that is probably increasingly important or more aware present of mind. So I do think that the state levels are uniquely positioned to kind of foster that conversation. I do think that from a, and I've heard lots of terms, blended economy, we have old economy, new economy. You know, as someone that is directly kind of well-rooted into the rec economy, I advocate very hard for public lands. And I think that is a resource that is important to us over time. And I know that there is a conversation, there does need to be a balanced solution. So I think it's a great question. I don't think there's an easy answer. I do think state and local conversations is really one of the most important ways to get at that. But sometimes those are hard to do.
Governor Malloy, you had a question, and then Governor Bullock, and then...
No, I was just going to share, first of all, the new store, by at least attendance, or because I've been by there a number of times, I don't know what your sales are, but you got a lot of people in there.
It's doing really well.
Good, good. That's in West Hartford. You know, Connecticut is one of the two most urban states in the nation. And we've had a funding problem maintaining our park system at a level that we were comfortable with. And we required good weather for good attendance in our summer park usage. What we did this past year was shift our support of parks to automobile fees, low ones. And we've seen an explosion of local in-state usage of the parks where we charge for parking. So if you have and by the way, it encourages people to keep their registration in your state. It's been a home run for us, and I know, quite frankly, you folks have in-state have been building off of that effort to get more people back into those particular parks, those very high usage parks. But if you had to pay a parking fee day after day that you wanted to use it, it got a little expensive. And it's been by all reports, a home run, and it's a steadier source of funds. So we find ourselves extending hours of operation, seasons of operation, because we know that it's budgeted ahead of time, because we can predict how many people are going to register their car or change their license plate or the like. So if anyone's looking for a different idea, that may be one.
Awesome. I could tell you that subscription models are always better than transaction models in these situations. That's a business reality that, so you went to a subscription model and it worked better than your transactional model.
Governor Bullock?
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I think that public lands are one of our great equalizers, meaning that we all own them equally, we can all get out, and a big economic driver. We've also done a lot of work trying to get private land access. We have 8 million acres where private parties will open up their lands for hunting and fishing in Montana. But following up on something that Governor Sandoval had said, you know, yeah, we have Glacier and we have Yellowstone. If we talk about trying to get people into the outdoors, one of the best ways to do that would be through our state park systems. We have 52 of them in Montana. Some of them are primitive, some of them are more developed. And I see a stream of people that go through, like the REI in Missoula as an example. And especially on the retail side, if the outdoor sector could say on the private side, well, what we ought to be doing, because it's in our interest, is getting people outdoors and making sure that if they're traveling through the state, they see what it has to offer. It might be a great opportunity to sort of work together so private industry is promoting other places where they can get access to great opportunities.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to address in my comment about partnering with brands, and it could be extended to partnering with retailers as well. But when you do that partnership, and it becomes what is it that's important within your state that you want to promote? What's the flavor of the day for, call it, all of these agencies? What is it that you want to drive? And to cross-market, cross-promote, it's an honor for me to do stuff with the state of Idaho. I think that any brand or any retailer would also view it as a special program for that region. And to the question that kind of went under the table about, what if you have a state that doesn't have all these great rivers, mountains, parks, I would say that my recommendation would be to view those resources that you do have as an opportunity to grow, and that specific focus you treat as a brand itself. And so you find how you cross-market, cross-promote. If you've got a kayak company that's booming and you've got this river push, that collaboration working, the brands, the retailers working in conjunction with the state agencies to promote what's important to the state, where you as the governors or you, your directors are asking for that assistance. There's a program called Tested in Idaho right now, and we're working on this where we have hang tags that go along our apparel, and we're basically promoting when somebody buys our gear, whether it's in Montana or it's in Nevada or Utah, there's an Idaho collaboration there. And I think that every state has the capability to do that, but it takes situational awareness. So who are the influencers within the industry in these brands that have these followings? I mean, REI is pretty evident, it's a giant, but you guys have brands and businesses within your states. It's just about fostering those relationships with them and then coordinating with them to say, hey, let's work on this, let's promote parks and visiting and so on.
Two words, just want to add on to that. The experience is the biggest trending economic engine right now. So Airbnb, you start looking at economically, business-wise, we're trying to step into that in a really big and specific way. Your outdoor rec coordinator, if driving people and the capability to deliver experiences in your state park system is a priority, you will find engagement. What we're discovering is we have to create the capability. So we have to find the people passionate about leading people into these new places, and then we have to put on-the-ground capabilities to take people that are not familiar with being in the outdoors, maybe new to them, and get them into these state parks. Once we do it, they're hooked for life. So I think you're onto something. I do believe that these outdoor rec economies and these state directors that are out there can really help be a part of that solution of unlocking people in your state park systems, which creates a virtuous cycle.
Great. I'm afraid we're out of time. Let me just wrap it up. Thank you guys I know how busy you are. I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I know what it's like to have an enterprise that's growing rapidly and know how busy you are. It means a lot to all of us to have you here. Let me just finish by saying that too often we also ignore those places of the spirit. And I think this is something that you guys have both touched on repeatedly. And I know when I was studying to be a geologist, I spent 2 summers north of Yellowstone Park because my field area was in the high Absarokas and wilderness area up there. And I can remember coming back and starting to go to church much more frequently because I'd been out where I hadn't seen, for 12 days at a time, hadn't seen another living soul. And all of the world's great religions, to my knowledge, where the religious leader really connected with God was they would go into the wilderness and they would go into those wild parts of where they were and bring back those essential truths that are about humanity. And I think in a funny way, part of what you're doing is helping create that connection with our spiritual sides as well. So thanks for sharing that with us, opening your spiritual sides to us, and for all you guys are doing for outdoor recreation. Great. I think we're adjourned.